It's been well over a year's wait, but Screamer is finally here. I remember watching the reveal for this at the 2024 Game Awards, and having my curiosity very well piqued. An arcade racer, in the modern day, that alone had my ears open, but seeing that it had a cyberpunky style, and wasn't going for an all-out everybody's racing game, focused on targeting a vast audience of players, but instead, a focused-in throwback to the arcade racers of old with grit, drama, a mature tone that wasn't afraid to get a little out there. This became one of my most anticipated new racing games. As things went on, my excitement for this project just kept growing. I mean, having Alex Lee, one of my favorite voice actors in one of my favorite games, Persona 3 Reload, be a leading role here, a doubling down on the tone established in the first trailer, showing a very brutal and dark world, placing an emphasis on story and characters. Something you do not ever see in a racing game these days, earning a mature rating, and being developed by the same people who did Hot Wheels Unleashed. I haven't seen a racing project like this in 10, 20 years. But hype and expectations are just one thing, and after spending a plethora of hours in Screamer over the past launch weeks, I have a lot to say. Welcome to my deep dive review into arguably this decade's most ambitious racing game, Screamer. Now, a lot of you are probably in the same boat as me, asking the question, well, what the hell even is Screamer? Well, the name carries a lot more weight than I first expected, or at least it used to. The series actually started off on MS-DOS back in 1996 as a very Ridge Racer-esque little racer, and a very heavily inspired one, that is. Everything about the visuals of this first game screamed Ridge Racer, and if you're asking me, not in a complimentary way. Does it look good? Yeah, of course. Well, that's because Ridge Racer looks good. It's a damn near carbon copy of what Ridge Racer looks like, even down to the very color palette. However, when we put that aside, the game was received really quite well. Well enough that later in that exact same year, a sequel was released. Screamer 2 took a lot of the original game's visuals and skeleton, but replaced it with a thesis that more or less became a pseudo-rally game. It's not one to be judged by its cover as to play. Screamer 2 has a true identity of its own, while using the sequel benefit of having an existing skeleton to plaster that over. The only real downside that I see in this one is it does somewhat tone down the bright, bubbly visuals for more of a down-to-earth feel, which does fit the rally theme, I suppose, but in exchange for a lot of the character of the original. Screamer Rally released the very next year in 1997, diving 100% into the rally theme. This is where I feel whatever spark existed with the original version for Screamer started to die out. I'm sure it was a fine rally game, but there was a cavalcade of other rally games of this era that looked and felt near on identical to this one. It's a strange theme with this series. It relies very heavily on identities more popular in other games, and while the games themselves may be fine, they never really had a chance to shine under their own light. Proven even truer with the next game, Screamer 4x4. Imagine Ridge Racer eventually became the equivalent of a mud-running off-road game. Well, that's exactly the spiral that happened with Screamer. This game was, to my knowledge, developed by an entirely different studio, but man, talk about a lack of synergy in a game series synchronicity. I mean, we went all the way to licensed cars in this one too, real Jeeps and Toyotas, and just how is this the same series again? The Screamer nameplate took on a quarter of a century long wait, 26 years until 2026, when finally, it's time for Screamer to make a new name and identity for itself. And boy, does it ever. This game's opening few hours are hands down some of the most memorable in a recent racing game release in probably 10 years? I truly mean this when I say that the marketing for how this game's aesthetic and tone somehow downplayed how radical this is. Screamer is a mature game, through and through. This ain't for kids. There's within even the opening hour mentions of death, murder, alcohol, plentiful cussing and swearing. And I can't believe I'm saying this about subject matters of murder, death, and alcohol, but it's refreshing. I'm so tired of the trope that racing games have to be for everyone and uber family friendly. It's a strange plague on this genre that nothing else really has. In the modern day, we've grown so accustomed to racing games where characters and narratives are an afterthought. And here comes Screamer, that doesn't just have a neat looking gameplay style and exists as an arcade racer, but builds this entire project around the story and characters of this game. I'm tired of glorified NPCs with dialogue blander than Weetabix. And regardless of anything else I have to say about this project, I am so glad that someone put in the work to stray from the monotonous, soulless crowd. This is established right from the start in the opening cinematic, quite emphatically. This is a very westernized anime-esque racer, so don't expect writing on the level of Berserk, Persona, hell even something like Cyberpunk Edgerunners. But what it is a loud, proud story about vengeance, identity, tying yourself to what you believe and what happens when morals, personal conflicts, and anger get in the way on the battleground of a racetrack. Moving on to some general impressions aesthetically. Yeah man, I love the style of this game. You really get the sense that this is exactly the vision that they had all the way from the drafting room. And they didn't tone it down or neuter those conceptual vibes in the finished product. I'd argue it has far more angst in actuality. For total first impressions, just look at how it boots up. Very retro futuristic cyberpunk menu layouts. It even has a damn title announcer like the original Resident Evil games. Which on a tangent, can we bring those back, please? Navigating is real neat too. The characters once again the highlight, and they're all over each category from arcade, to the tournament story mode, even the multiplayer in the gallery. The latter one there even vetting you access to have a look at a lot of this game's concept art, and backgrounds for the full-on animated cutscenes. It's super cool when games have this kind of thing built in. And while I'm in this kind of area, I want to give a huge shout out to the accessibility options here. This game does let you choose between single stick and twin stick controls, which I'm a big fan of. You can also slow down the game speed, and play at a slower rate if you're newer to high-paced arcade racers. There's also pseudo traction control and stability control, which can help you modulate throttle, brake, and steering inputs. This is exactly what I like to see. You're not dumbing down the game for experienced players and everyone, just for the sake of beginners like most other games do. But you're also not alienating those newcomers, simply giving them the tools to not feel left out and making them feel like heroes at first. That when they start building skill, you can shut them off and enjoy the game at its rawest. And when you get out on track, man, this game stays cool as shit. The aesthetical juggernaut that this game is does not end when you actually get into it. This is an utterly gorgeous racing game. I cannot get over the amount of color and energy near on every frame in this game has. The aesthetics are not going to be for everyone, absolutely. But man, at the right times, this game just has that special sauce. Performance has been pretty great for me, without having to rely on much upscaling or any frame generation at all on PC. And I've had absolutely zero hard crashes in the 2 weeks I've been playing, although there were a few small bugs here and there. This is an arcade racer through and through. The tracks are full of long, sweeping corners to complement the very drifty physics style. The background scenery is unique with each and every track. Thank God this is an open world adventure slob. You have a plethora of styles and moods that you'll be racing in the middle of daytime in deserts, through lush forests, or at night on freeways and cities that make it feel just like you're in Night City. The variation is great, although not perfect. Especially in the early stages of the game, it feels like there's just a bit of a lack of variety in different locations, as you tend to repeat locations a lot. It does get better as you progress, as further in the story, more and more locations open up to you, and often get more challenging layouts to go along with that. But it's certainly not perfect. Another problem that I have with these tracks is, well, there's not a lot of strategy to them. Lots of other arcade racers, I'll use Need for Speed Hot Pursuit as an example here, have shortcuts that you can take a risk on, for the reward, of course, of coming out ahead. And while there are shortcuts in Screamer, there aren't exactly much of a risk, and honestly, sometimes they're just cheat codes to instantly destroy races by winning. They feel a bit too hidden and almost tacked on last minute, and I think it's a shame because if they were better implemented, we'd be looking at a tremendous set of tracks here. But there's so many things that first impressions can say, and I haven't even scratched the surface. I want to dive deeper into what I still think is the most unique part of Screamer, which is the story, career, and characters of this game. All three are so inherently intertwined in a way that is so utterly unique, which for the most part is good, but also leads to, if you're asking me, some of my biggest problems with the game as well. Starting with those characters and the setup for the story, there's 7 teams that you'll be dealing with, and in a very non-traditional way, you don't necessarily have one singular protagonist. You'll actually be playing as and experiencing the game's narrative through the lenses of each and every person on all 7 teams. If that sounds cool, you're damn right. And if it sounds messy, you would also be very, very correct. The great part of this is that you don't really get any characters that feel half-assed here, because if you're gonna play as someone here, they better damn well be interesting, or else there wouldn't be much point now, would there? Most of the cast here is really great. Not just acted well, but they've all got unique motives that tie into their individual backstories that will then culminate and plant their way into the evolving narrative as a whole. Some of them genuinely really invested me. There's one that I think is superbly well integrated, where you play as a gentleman who's overcoming his fear of driving again after a huge racing accident. This coincides in him having to work up the courage early game to even get behind the wheel, but when he finally does, there is a phenomenal implementation of ludonarrative harmony, putting you behind the wheel, but having the game temporarily restrict your speed, as if to show his level of restraint racing. It'll also then dramatize and make hitting the walls with even a light tap far more dramatic than anyone else, due to that trauma. And then finally, after the first lap, getting used to driving again, it lets you loose without any restrictor, giving you personal reign overcoming that narrative obstacle, which is such a cool thing. I am a sucker for when games use this medium to tell stories organically. Not the only example of this as well, by the way. There's an in-universe explanation as for why you can take enemies out on the track and have them come back through the tournament's technology called the Echo. Most games just leave that up to it being a video game, and yet here we are with a way to tie that into the narrative. Way cooler that way. Another thing that I really love about each character is that most of them speak a variety of different languages, and instead of other games forcing people to speak English and making a mockery out of their native language, Screamer let the voice actors speak in their native tongue and then overlaid English subtitles over. That's how you respect culture. Aside from that, the teams all have their different backgrounds, which can be differentiated in presentation, such as with the pop stars, having a live chat theme during dialogue sequences that the others don't get. Now yes, the characters here are very eccentric, which no doubt is not going to be for everyone, but honestly I'd rather have them be a bit too wacky than just cookie cutter. It does get a bit much at times, with one of the main team members, I believe her name is Rosen or something like that, swearing in quite literally almost every sentence. The writing is certainly trying a bit much at times. And for the downsides of all of this is there's simply too many people to keep track of. And honestly, due to the switch in perspective in almost every race, you have no idea who to root for. Yeah, it's fun to keep track of everyone here and gain so much insight, but it's just a little too much. And well, there's a reason that most games and stories in general stick with a single protagonist and tell a story that way. It prevents this mess and moral conflict of who you should even care for. Another pro, and on the flip side con of this, is that all of the vehicles here have their own identity to tie into the driver. The pop stars have speakers built into the taillights and digital text graphics to boot. The more rough and tough teams are like exoskeletons. The urban executive types have luxurious supercars and classic influence. No car really looks the same. They did try to tie this even further to the characters by having unique power-ups and abilities with each character's vehicle. Now, really cool idea, and I'm not entirely trying to dog on this, but almost all of them end up being virtually the same. Either a way to extend your boosts, or do more damage with KOs. I'd rather each team have a unique gimmick and make those even more varied, as at least to me, they seem a bit same old same old. Zooming out to look at the story and characters as a whole here, I love that they put so much work into this narrative and the characters that give it life. But I'd honestly make the argument that it's a bit too much in actuality. Something I haven't really mentioned yet is the fact that the story is told through these big story beats and these stunning, beautifully animated sequences. There's nothing bad I have to say about these. They're a highlight that I always look forward to. But the minor beats, little character interactions and moments, are told through a visual novel format. And don't be fooled, there is a lot of dialogue here. There is easily hours of text on text, and most of it truthfully feeling like a bloat and filler with occasional little gems of hilarious dialogue or great character moments. I do feel as if this was a bit underrepresented in the marketing for this game. This is a visual novel and a racing game, not a racing game that has visual novel elements. And my issues with bloat and how this game is paced leads directly into a lot more of what I have to say about the campaign. Getting the campaign right for this game was absolutely essential. This doesn't have the perk of Horizon or The Crew, where a huge chunk of the player base are buying those games to play very socially or to roam across vast open worlds as sandboxes. The campaign is the main reason why you pay the full $70 for Screamer, and it's hard to say that it doesn't give you enough for that money, but instead doesn't quite understand how to best utilize where the time should have been spent. I've already touched on how I think the story itself for the campaign is great. No masterpiece, but for a thrilling, dramatic piece about rivalries and personal development, It more than exceeds what most racers try and do these days and gives the narrative skeleton for the campaign. That's all fine and dandy. The presentation for the most part is fantastic. The cutscenes look great. Mid-race gameplay looks just as good as it feels. And some of the visual novel elements are interesting. And yet I still feel my time spent in this game was so mismanaged. I touched on the fact that there is a lot of reading and text here, and that is definitely not putting it lightly. You're going to spend at least a third of your playtime throughout Screamer keeping up with the story, and not all through cutscenes. If given the choice to restructure what we have here, I really would have cut down the number of text sequences by at least half to a quarter of what we have here. There truly did feel to me like that much filler and regurgitated plot and character points littered throughout. The animated cutscenes are so good. If we cut out a lot of the text and used those same character beats but worked into new cutscenes, this game would flow so much better. But of course, that would be expensive, and that's my primary guess as to why this game is structured the way that it is. It's super cheap to hire voice actors to record lines and then turn that into a dialogue sequence. But it comes at the cost of quality and cohesion, which at least on a storytelling point of view, is a pretty substantial knock on this game. And I wouldn't say that my criticisms stop there. While I think the core loop of race-to-race gameplay in Screamer is genuinely fantastic. It's fast-paced, full of action, plenty of switching up vehicles and characters throughout. There's a real big key missing element that, especially in an arcade racer, feels like a huge misstep, and it's that there's hardly any event styles here. The story is told through chapter formats, and due to that, most chapters all revolve around being pretty much exclusively just racing, either as a team or solo, maybe tossing in the occasional time trial run. And that's entirely it here, folks. No proper deathmatch styles, no eliminators, no drift events. Nothing creative to really set things apart here. And considering the creative juggernaut the rest of this game is, it is a proper shame to me that on the track, most of the time you'll just be doing some relatively run-of-the-mill racing. Now again, to reiterate, I think the racing is fantastic, but I just can't help but yearn for more gameplay. Games this fun don't come around too often, and I'd rather spend less time in text sequences and more time experiencing new events and ways to clash on the track using the narrative that these wonderful developers took so much effort and time crafting. I want to take a bit of a detour for a second and talk a little more about the vehicles and on-track gameplay of Screamer, and how they relate to the same pros and cons. There is a very healthy amount of cars here, one for each character, and I've already gone over how visually they try to tie themselves to the drivers. But there's another level of diversity in vehicle here that I noticed in regards to how they drive. Most of the vehicles here are fantastic to get behind the wheel of. They're quick, snappy, and the physics model in this game feels very well refined. There's a wonderful balance of not being totally piss easy, and having to put a bit of effort in to understand how these cars drive. But there are a few that are total disasters. Specifically, this one that's inspired by the older Nissan Zs. Not sure what the name was, but this one feels like QA skipped right past it as any semblance of throttle means wheel spin, and the tach gets pinned to redline. It's like driving a Hellcat, but you never let go of the throttle. Almost impossible to gain control of. Made even worse if you like driving with the one-handed controls, because for some godforsaken reason, if you want to play this game without twin-stick controls, the game locks you into having the throttle pinned 100% of the time. There's even an option to turn this on and off, but it's blanked out if you have single-stick controls enabled. Utterly mind-numbing decision that. What this led to for me is a few events that, due to my control preference, having to spend an hour or two just to get lucky with bad AI runs, and turning on every assist imaginable just to get past. I totally thought this was just a me thing and I suck at games, which, okay, yeah, sometimes it happens, but I'm far from the only one who noticed this. I really do wish the game did let you enjoy this physics model with a little more control, especially if you choose to play with the one analog stick. Having control over both throttle and brake is a necessity, and the fact that it isn't always the choice here, I really hope that gets patched out. Sticking to the racetrack, this is a combat racer, but it's a pretty simple one. The ability to KO opponents is great, and I love the fact that boost isn't just a simple meter that refills. You have to actually time when you activate it to get the most out of it, and the game will reward that level of play with more KOs to rock out. I do wish there was more ways to go after enemies though. Not quite to the level of Mario Kart for example, but Power-ups or on-track hazards would be a really great way to ramp up the on-track chaos even more, as once you get used to the shields, KOs, boost, and overdrive later in the game, it's a pretty simple racer. There's nothing inherently wrong with simple, but for a zanier game like this, I just want a little more going on. Looking at the garage, I think this game does customization really well. For the style of game that this is more than enough. Want to change the vinyl on your car? Done. Wheels? No question. Even the headlights themselves? Yeah, we got you. This is the style of arcade racer where I think the customizability does add to the experience. And especially since some of the cars really do match the eccentric nature of their drivers, it's nice to have the ability to make them a little more yours at the end of the day. As you can very easily see, there's so much to like about Screamer. But as easy as it is for me to say that, it's got a handful of little things that, when compounded, starts to get in the way of my outstanding praise. So what's my final verdict? Screamer is just not quite a masterpiece. And honestly, that's okay. Do I still think that this is a tremendous racing game? Absolutely. Not everything has to be an infallible masterpiece for me to smile while I'm reviewing it. Games like this don't come around all that often, and especially in the modern day, well, they're damn on extinct. Is this game worth the $70 asked at launch? Well, that's a very nuanced question. On one hand, I just don't feel like I would ask you to go out there and drop the full asking price. And this is without the semblance of a doubt. A game to pick up at least 25% off. There's another element to add to this though. Screamer is a rarity, and one that is going to be judged very harshly by how it sells. So I ask you the question, do you want arcade racers to stay alive? If so, vote with that wallet and buy the game. It's going to be a blast, and you send the message that we, yes, we, the community, want games like this. Screamer is a throwback to an era that so many of us have been yearning for years. And it would be foolish for a game that we all asked for to not do well, wouldn't it? I love this game, and yeah, it's not for everyone. Hell, it ain't perfect. That's kind of the beauty of a game that stands out. If you're even somewhat interested or a fan of arcade or combat racers, I can easily recommend Screamer. And who knows, it may very well be the last of its kind. So enjoy it while you can. Don't let this become a fantastic experience that you never gave the chance, and let the modern arcade racer die out right in front of you.